So, I was under the apparently wrong impression that, with the, well, starting back, going to, we'll go to the last movie, Dark of the Moon.
Okay.
When, Megan Fox was fired by Michael Bay. So it was just Shia doing his thing with the flavor of the week. And, then after Dark of the Moon came out, it was getting more and more publicized that Shia and Michael Bay appeared to not really like each other very much. And that this new Transformers was going to be something totally different, post-Pain and Gain.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to bring Wahlberg over, and they were just going to do, basically, I kept hearing the word reboot. Apparently it's not a reboot
No,
after watching it. But,
it's definitely 4.
So this is what we have. And everybody was really hyped for this one because obviously Transformers 2 and 3 are known for being not exactly well liked by most people. I think general audiences tend to like it, but
people that critique things usually
the
don't.
Transformers series is really weird like that
Mm-hmm.
because they're notoriously hated and beloved at the same time. I'm not sure how that works, but that seems to be what they are. But even the people that don't like the series had hope for this one because, number one, Michael Bay showed so much promise with Pain and Gain.
Yes.
It made you realize that he can actually make a real movie. And secondly, people suspecting it was a reboot when it's not, apparently. And lastly, apparently Michael Bay actually went on record saying that he made the Transformers movies for, is it Paramount?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He basically made the Transformers movies for Paramount so they'd let him make Pain and Gain.
Yep.
Which made everybody believe that he was done. And sure enough, the news dropped that he was making this one. This one is called Age of Extinction. And pretty much the only reason for that is because it starts with how the dinosaurs became extinct. Which, sorry Schwarzenegger, was not the Ice Age. But actually was, some Transformers came down and wiped them out. And were treated to these animated dinosaurs that, you remember the Disney movie Dinosaur from like 15 years ago?
Yeah.
The dinosaurs look more real in that movie, but regardless, we're treated to basically a cartoon segment where all the dinosaurs are wiped out in and multiple explosions because it's a Michael Bay movie. Of course, that's how Michael Bay would depict the dinosaurs going out.
Yeah.
And then we just cut forward suddenly. It's like watching the Tree of Life. Dinosaurs now. And Mark Wahlberg is a failed inventor named Yeager, and he's trying to start up a company, or already has a company, we don't really know, because he's broke, called Yeager Robotics. The reason I remember the name is because they want to show it to us everywhere. Because we meet him, and he's got like a Yeager Robotics bumper sticker on his truck that we get a close-up of. And then we meet his daughter, and for some reason his daughter, we only see this in one scene, she like pulls a wagon with her. And she has like Yeager Robotics stuff all over it, even though she resents his thirst for invention.
He's Wayne Zelensky, basically.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it.
But with only one kid, and she stays at her normal height the whole time.
Yes.
And I basically had lost that optimism once the movie started. Because, first off, we get a little, this is post the battle in Chicago is what they keep calling it. And now, all Transformers are, like, banned. And if you, like, find one, you have to call the government and you'll get a massive reward. Because they just want to do away with all of them. That's the plan. Supposedly. Because, you know, the corrupt government suits you know, of course, will be taking place at some point. But no, I'm talking about the stuff where we get to know our characters, which is so always wonderful in movies like this.
Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg is going back into the happening mode.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mark Wahlberg can be a fantastic actor, dramatic or comedic, especially comedic. He's really great with comedy. But here he's back in kind of talking to the plants territory. So right now he's watching this video going, "What? No!" Sorry. I actually I think the hate's a little too strong, but that's another story for another day. But no, we start off meeting this character, and we meet his best friend from school. The comedy relief in this movie is played by T.J. Miller, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And he plays one of those characters where you know exactly the kind of character he is before we even see him. When he pulls up in his car and you hear the music he's listening to, you know this character front to back. Yep. Before he even gets out of the car. He drives, he drives a car with one of, like, you know, the surfboard on top of it, and he gets out, he's got, you know, the tropical shorts, and he's got the shirt that says Surf Crazy, and he's got the long hair, and he's basically going to be quipping his way through the next hour. And we have to put up with it.
Yep.
Thankfully, minor spoiler, it only lasts for about an hour of this 3-hour movie. But, continuing on, we start off and they do some slapstick in a movie theater. Now, pretty much the only reason this scene takes place in a movie theater is so it can throw out a self-reference. The guy from Office Space is the guy that the old guy that, like, is senile and, like, kind of works there with them. And he's talking about the old-timey movies and how there's nothing like the classics now. And he just had to make the riff in this movie of all movies. Ironically, all the studios make anymore nowadays are sequels and remakes. I've said this many times before and I'll say it again. Just because you're taking a shot at yourself doesn't necessarily mean that going ahead and doing the thing you're taking a shot at yourself for is going to make it okay. But anyway, long story short, too late. Wahlberg finds there's a giant truck in his garage. Lo and behold, it's a transformer. Now, they're broke, they can't do anything, they're about to get evicted by wannabe Monique in an embarrassing scene.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is turn this truck into the government. And they can get money and all their troubles will be over. But unfortunately, he wants to take it. The truck ends up being Optimus Prime, of course. Because, coincidence. And, once again, I'm trying to do long story short for a 3-hour Transformers movie.
Yeah.
You have your government suit that's Kelsey Grammer, and you have your big shot scientist guy who's trying to build an army by way of Decepticons using the brain reading thing from Transcendence or something. Because you go to a Transformers movie for the plot, of course.
Yeah.
So naturally a battle will ensue. The end. But we've got a lot of subplots and product placement to fit into this. And recognizable actors doing paycheck work.
Yep.
The main thing about this movie is it's raising the stakes. Because it's all about, you know, Optimus Prime has never killed a human, but when he finds out who's responsible for this, he's going to kill them. And really, really loud action scene after action scene ensues until this movie ends. But here's the thing. It's not just... Okay, I understand the Transformers movies are big, gigantic, enormous budget action movies. So naturally they're going to be loud. But I don't necessarily mean that kind of loud you might be thinking of. I mean obnoxiously, annoyingly... Everything, even if it's not an action scene, is really fucking loud.
Yes.
Really.
Unbearably loud.
Maybe it was a problem with our theater, but I think the movie is just naturally that loud.
I'm turning it down the second I get to work tonight.
And speaking of annoying, one of our subplots is... Now, of course, we don't have Megan Fox or... Rosie Huntington, whatever her name is.
Whiteley. I actually remembered that, and that's frightening.
We have this girl who is Wahlberg's daughter to wear the really, really short shorts and have the camera linger on her ass occasionally. Because that's Michael Bay. And, of course, she has this big fight with Wahlberg about how she's not allowed to date. Because... His wife and her mom, she's dead, so he's not dating, so she's not dating. There is no dating in this house. That's the way the dialogue goes.
Things I hate about you?
So, regardless of that, she already has a boyfriend, and wouldn't you know it, conveniently enough, he just happens to be a driver. That's really the only description of his job we get. Expected him to put a toothpick in his mouth and go, I drive for movies. But not his best Ryan Gosling. This guy couldn't be Ryan Gosling if he tried. This guy's name is Shane.
Yeah.
And we learned they've been dating for months, and Wahlberg's just going to have to deal with it because he's their only hope in this war because he drives fast. And... Of course, we get a very long scene of him. It's a Michael Bay movie. You have to have a chase on the highway. But here's the thing. We do this big scene where he's driving them around. But then there's this moment in this middle of this chase where apparently they've been dating a long time behind Wahlberg's back. So God knows what they've been doing. Or how much he's endangered her life by now. They get into this, what appears to be like a half-constructed building, and they're at the top of it. And she grabs his shoulder and she says, Shane, do the thing. And he's like, oh, the thing? And it's like this big dangerous thing. You have Wahlberg doing his, what's the thing? I am the disapproving father. Because we had the disapproving mother last week.
Yep.
The thing that apparently they've done before is to drive off this half-constructed building and land on this little inclined plane and then drive off. Apparently this is something they've done before. In what context did this happen before?
Yeah, I feel really safe if I'm Mark Wahlberg at this point.
And that she simply knows it as the thing and he knows what she's talking about. But, you know what, never mind, because the action scene just keeps going and completely disregards that.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They bring back Exposition Bot from the other movie, the tiny little annoying bot that might as well have D.L. Hughley's voice and has the blue hair.
Mm-hmm.
He's only got one leg now, though. The poor thing. So, and that's pretty much it. Now, the problem is, these movies are mainly known for, you know, you have your people who will just pick apart every single thing about it, but then you have, the people who say, you know what, it's just a gigantic action movie, why are you being so picky, just watch it and have fun.
Yeah.
Because the action scenes are generally, well praised. Like, no matter how bad the movies are, they always get the Oscar nominations for visual effects and sound.
Yeah.
This one probably will be no exception. It's one of the most hated movies of the last decade, but even Revenge of the Fallen got those Oscar nominations. Well, the problem here is the action scenes don't really do anything to be that memorable. Like, believe it or not, I can't believe it myself, I can actually single out a few action scenes from the other movies. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that here. The most thing we get, the closest thing we get to something memorable in this movie, in 3 hours, is naturally the dinosaur transformers. But they're in the last half hour if you're like spending the whole movie waiting for them. Now, as far as some of these characters, we have, I mentioned we have Kelsey Grammer as our villain. And he's not bad. No. I was kind of excited when he was cast. He does the sinister, thing that he does. Basically, a not as homicidal or crazy version of his character from that short-lived show, Boss. And his tactical guy, basically, is Titus Welliver, who you might know. He's a great actor, but you might mainly know him from Ben Affleck's movies. He says he's a federal agent, but he's basically Kelsey Grammer's muscle.
Yeah.
And we have Stanley Tucci's here basically to be the smart scientist guy. You can tell Aaron Kruger is a screenwriter who's basically known for messing up a lot of things. And basically he wrote Stanley Tucci's character to say scientific things and to sound as smart as possible. There's a particular scene in the movie where he's asked just a really basic question, like, is that what I think it is? He's one of those guys where instead of saying yes, he says precisely, which is with as much emphasis as you can possibly get in there. There is a scene where he just screams the word algorithm. It's this is a scientist, can't you tell? Who else is here?
He also has sorry.
It took me a minute to realize that John Goodman's in this movie. When I first heard his voice, he's a voice of one of the Transformers. I thought it was him, but then as the movie progressed, I had to keep going back and forth. I think that's him, but I'm not quite sure. I finally checked the credits and it was.
Yeah.
And I could have sworn it was Jason Statham. But it's just a voice actor that can do Jason Statham well. It was the green one that I thought was him.
I thought it was Vinnie Jones myself.
And another problem is this is another one of those action movies where they do have action scenes that could be cool or epic, as they say nowadays. But this is one of those movies that kind of messes that up, because every time it seems like a scene that's kind of doing something cool with it, they stop the movie to go into slow-mo. As if to say, we don't think you can pick out the epic moments by yourself. We have to tell you by emphasizing them with slow-mo. So that kind of watered it down as well, on top of the fact that they just go on forever. Now let me go back to this story a little more about the daughter. Because this is the biggest problem. Apart from the T.J. Miller character. But like I said, thankfully that didn't last. If we had to deal with him for 3 hours, I think my head would have exploded.
Good possibility.
But anyway, this daughter has a big... Number one, obviously she's mainly there to wear the short shorts and for us to pan up her legs and her ass every time she's introduced in a scene. Now, the thing here is, she has a big thing about how basically she takes care of Wahlberg because he doesn't have a job and he can't get his company off the ground and he's broke and they're going broke. So she's the one that takes care of him. And she basically gives this speech about, I'm the adult one here. Let me remind you that the very, very introduction, the very first scene, the very first line that she has is she's getting out of her friend's car and she looks back at them and she's basically screaming about how they're going to go get wasted and she can't wait. This is the grown-up of the movie.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have to have the scene where the disapproving father is okay now with everything that's going on. The guy, she's 17 and he's 20, but it's Romeo and Juliet law in Texas, whatever the fuck that was. But anyway, Obviously, we know that scene is coming, where eventually the boyfriend's gonna be the one that saves the day, and Wahlberg sees the error of his ways for not realizing immediately that, that guy's the man. And there's a particular scene with a train. We've just had a long extended action sequence that probably would have been the end of a normal movie, and we're stopping to slow down again. And they find a train, and they start to get on it, and you hear the guy say, well, we gotta sleep somewhere. And in my head, I thought, oh shit, here comes the character development. Surprisingly, this scene didn't last very long, but okay, everything gets quiet, and everything gets calm, and everything's nice, and we see her sleeping, safe and sound by herself. Before we even cut to that, your first thought is, well, here's the scene where Wahlberg's sitting with the kid by himself, and this is going to be the scene where he accepts him. Like I said, they thankfully didn't. They do that, but thankfully it didn't last long. The scene's only like 30 seconds long. Either way, this scene was not going to work. Because if they wanted to do the character development thing, it's not long enough. But if they were going to try to do the character development thing, it was going to go on too long. The scene was never going to work.
It's a lose-lose.
Which is why you should have just subtracted this immediately and made the movie 2 hours, but...
Yes.
Whatever. It's actually, I keep saying 3 hours, it's actually 2:45, but with trailers it's an even 3 hours. Product placement everywhere. I saw Oreos, I saw Bud Light, Goodyear, Tom Ford, and Victoria's Secret. I'm sure there were plenty more, but those were the ones that were really front and center. Not as bad as Sears and Man of Steel, but...
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
But, still fairly present. And like I said, in a bigger, dumber movie like, say, Battleship, maybe it could be a little fun. Like the, I think it was Subway that was all over Battleship?
Yes.
Sometimes it can be fun, to have the big dumb action movie with the product placement and everything's obvious. Like Man of Steel, I actually kind of like Man of Steel.
Yeah, Man of Steel's good.
But, in a movie like this that kind of kills anything you could like about it right away, you're in for a long haul. And one thing I'd like to talk about is, another thing, Wahlberg's character is a liar. And they do this because they try to get sympathy out of him. Because he's talking to, I think he's talking to Optimus Prime. And it's just casually, just hanging out with him amidst this battle.
Why not?
What I was talking about with, there is a whole scene at the beginning when he talks about fixing Optimus Prime himself.
Yep.
And the daughter gives him a whole lecture about not turning him in for the money. And Wahlberg has a whole explanation for that. Well, when he's talking to Optimus later, he said, he was confessing to Optimus Prime. He said, I was really just fixing you so I could give you to the government for money.
That's your hero, folks. Right there. That's your hero.
But he wasn't going to do that because we had a whole scene where the daughter lectures him about not doing that.
I don't know why he said that.
It's supposed to make him, I'm sorry, Optimus, my character's sympathetic now because I make mistakes. That's the whole point. He's saying, we humans, we make mistakes. You robots don't understand that. Or something like that.
That's reaching right there. It really is.
So, that's it. And lastly, I'd just like to say, there is so much obvious... The effects in this are kind of... they're not bad, but they're not to the level of the other movies. The effects in this look a lot more animated. I know you have to... I know obviously you can't do a live-action Transformers movie without CGI. It's literally impossible. But there was something a lot more convincing about the prior effects in this one. They just look more cartoony in this. And what I was starting to think was... the only thing that's live-action in this movie at all... I'm sure everything is done in front of a green screen. Surely everything, at least. Or most of it. And all you have are these characters that do the disapproving father and the... I've got to, win everybody over boyfriend. And the daughter, who is worthless. The daughter is so worthless in this movie. There is a scene where she has to. This is where the movie lost me, and this is like almost 2 hours in. This is when I just got bored with the action scenes. She gets abducted in a net.
Yeah.
And they have to go up and save her. And that's not even the climax. She gets abducted in a net, they go up there and save her, and the movie's still got like 45 minutes left. She's in this gigantic net, and she's in a car, but she opens the car door and she's like, help me, get me out of here. And he's like, jump out. The holes in the net are like this big. All she has to do is just jump down. She's not very far off the ground yet. She could easily just land on her feet if she just jumps through the hole in the net. But she just sits in the car and screams until she's completely abducted. That is how worthless this character is.
Yeah.
Now, it's supposed to make the boyfriend look more heroic when he rescues her. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is the live-action characters are so worthless in this movie. Why is it even live action? Why don't they just do, like, animation like the Final Fantasy movie? And it would be shorter. You could do a Transformers movie animated like the Final Fantasy movie, and it could be like an hour 45.
I actually like that more.
I think it'd be more well liked by everybody else too.
Yeah.
But no, we have to deal with all of this. Almost 3 hours. Half of it is really, really long and loud, deafening action scenes that go on forever and aren't even exciting. And the other half are the characters I just talked about. The T.J. Miller surfer guy, whose every single line every 5 seconds is supposed to be funny. We were in there with about 15 people because we were in the very first 10 o'clock showing, and nobody was laughing at anything, so
nope.
I don't know how anybody felt, but yes, that's basically what you have to look forward to. But I imagine if people are big fans of the other three, they'll be just fine.
Oh, I'm sure the fans are going to love this movie.
So, whatever you want to do. But that's my opinion of it.
Yeah. Nice cameo from Thomas Lennon, though.
That's not really a cameo. He had a few scenes. He works for the president.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool. Because obviously I'm a steak mark, so that's why I had to say that. Okay.
Our second movie is a movie that's going limited this week called Snowpiercer. Who's from the same director as a popular movie called The Host, I think. Not the Saoirse Ronan, Stephanie Meyer movie from last year. I'm not quite sure. I heard a lot about it, but never actually saw it, so I'm really not quite sure what it even is. But he's a very well acclaimed director, and I can buy that by seeing this movie. The story of Snowpiercer, it takes place in 2031, and we're in a post-apocalyptic future because they were doing a test that was like a global warming experiment, and it turned the entire Earth into practically ice and snow, and the world literally froze over. And the remaining survivors got on this train. Apparently the train is called Snowpiercer, but I don't ever remember it actually being called that. Maybe Ed Harris said it at one point. But it makes sense because, that's what it is. Also, it's worth noting, I think this is based on a series of French comic books or something like that. So it could already have like a cult following, I think, before it was made. And basically the way Snowpiercer is built is the cars are separated by the classes. Where you have Ed Harris, the guy who runs everything, is... by the way, I've been hearing that people consider Ed Harris a casting spoiler because he's shrouded in mystery for like almost all of the movie. But his name is on the poster, so I don't know where that comes from. But anyway, and as the cars go back, you eventually get to the very caboose of this train. And that's where basically all the basically the people, the non-contributors of society in a normal city would be in there. And they're basically treated like prisoners. They're, some people who work for Ed Harris come in occasionally, and they'll take the children of them and just take them forward, and we don't know where they're going with them. There's an older couple that used to be in like an orchestra because they're looking for a violinist to go to the front of the train. But they're only going to take one of them because they only need one. So to prove a point, they beat the shit out of one of them and take the other. And yes, it's basically... Actually, I'll get to that in a second. There's a whole comparison that some people have for this that's a bit extreme, but possible. The main story is we follow Chris Evans, who is basically leading a revolt against the train, and is trying to build a small army of these people to break towards the front of the train and take over the engine. To basically end this whole separation thing and bring them out of the depths of the train and keep them from being prisoners. And he's got help from... Actually, let's go ahead and go through the cast list. We have John Hurt, who is basically the voice of reason. He has one arm and one leg. But he's basically the voice of reason and the old wise man. And basically Chris Evans' plan is to appoint him the leader. And have him run the train instead of Ed Harris. Because Ed Harris is basically a tyrant. We have his basically best friend, who is Jamie Bill, who basically worships the ground he walks on. And will basically help him in doing anything. There's Octavia Spencer, who is basically a mother who has her child taken away from her, and that's basically her main goal in life, is to get her child back from God, because we have no idea where they're being taken. They're just being taken and carried off. And we have Ewan Bremner, Spud from Trainspotting, and he has a horrible fate that makes him vengeful to help in this revolt. As I've said, the entire Earth has frozen over. Well, he makes the mistake of, the person that comes in to take the children, he gets mad because his child is taken away. And in a fit of rage, he takes off his shoe and throws it and hits her in the head with it. And his punishment, that comes from Tilda Swinton, who we'll talk about in a second, his punishment is there is a little hole in the train, like a window without glass. And they stick his arm through it. And you just hear them say 7 minutes should do. So they hold his arm out of the train until it freezes solid. And then they take a gigantic mallet and shatter it. While it's still attached to him. Which I think maybe possibly we can assume is how John Hurt lost his arm and leg. I don't remember if that's ever mentioned or not. It was actually a while ago that I saw this. I'm just now reviewing it because it comes out this weekend. Now we have basically the main villain of the movie, more or less, besides Ed Harris, is Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton is this... For a while, the gender's a bit of a mystery, because she's obviously playing a woman because they keep calling her she, but all the guards call her sir. So that was confused for a while, and just, Tilda Swinton is a master of doing this unrecognizable thing. So to be totally honest, sometimes it is a little hard to tell whether Tilda Swinton is playing a man or a woman. But they keep calling her she, so I assume she's a woman. And her performance, it's one of my favorite performances of the year, because she's so wonderfully evil. And she can do that really well. And she's doing this thing with her voice, and she has a great monologue about how... this also goes in with how well the movie's written, too. Like, with such a high concept, it's actually... The dialogue is really well written, too. She has this whole speech where she takes the shoe that he threw at her. And she talks about how a shoe knows its place. by being, like, on the foot at the bottom of the body. Just like, they need to be a shoe and know their place at the back of the train and stay there. Now, regarding her performance, this might sound like a really, really weird comparison, but just hear me out because this is just what I thought of. If you, for some reason, have been watching SNL recently, in the past year or so, Vanessa Bayer has this character she does frequently on Weekend Update called Jacob the Bar Mitzvah Boy. Vanessa Bayer's performance as Jacob the Bar Mitzvah Boy is pretty much what Tilda Swinton's doing here. In a nutshell, to give you an idea. Which is another reason I was confusing her sex a little bit. And then we have this, I think he's a frequent action star. His name is Song Kang-ho, I think. He's a frequent actor of the director's movies as well. He basically plays a security expert, and he's got a daughter. And they basically keep him in what appears to be, like, a drawer in a morgue. He stays in, like, one of those at solitary confinement. And in the middle of the revolt, they break him out of there, and he helps them, and they continue. So as we've talked about, this does have a very philosophical outlook regarding classes and stuff like that. Particularly, you know, like, even though it's set in the future, it really speaks about, you know, the separation of classes as of nowadays and stuff like that. While having that outlook, it is also a really, really effective action movie. Which is really interesting to say about a movie completely set on a train. Mm-hmm. Because obviously they have to go from car... It's basically like a video game. They have to go from car to car until they get to the front. And each time there's something there. There is this really, really fantastically awesome scene where we learn that, obviously, it's 2031 and they've basically been living life on a train. So they eventually learn that the guns that the guards have don't have bullets, because bullets are basically extinct. So once they figure that out, they go into the room, and there's windows, and there's guards everywhere. Guards are filling this car, and they all have weapons that are a blade of some sort. And we have the revolt here, who only has their weapons. They have nothing else to help themselves with. And the guards put on night vision goggles. So you have the guards with the night vision goggles and the blades and swords and whatever, the axes, whatever they have. And you have the little revolt here. Certainly a battle is about to ensue. And sure enough, right then and there, the train goes through a tunnel. So they have to fight in pitch blackness. And the scene is fantastic. And as they get farther and farther ahead, the cars get more, like, classy and sophisticated. Like, there's one that's, like, just an elaborate garden, and then there's one that's, like, an aquarium. Now, here's one of my favorite performances in the movie as well. One of the cars is a classroom, and it's got all the kids in it. And the teacher is played by Alison Pill. And this teacher is a psychotic gun-toting woman that has the kids chanting about impending death. And it's basically, this classroom she has basically made a cult. And we get another action scene involving, she has a basket that she's walking around with, and, you know, kids are taking stuff out of it. At the bottom of this basket is a machine gun that she uses on them. Not the children, but the revolt. And that's the thing. It's only one scene, but Alison Pill owns this scene so much. It's a really great performance. And a lot of, there's probably a lot of complaints about the commentary being blatantly obvious. There's another thing that this movie has going on that I've heard a few times. I didn't think about it while I was watching it, but when somebody explained it, that's an interesting thought. Somebody basically compared Snowpiercer the train to a concentration camp. Because you basically have the Jews who are the prisoners at the back of the train. And then you have the guards who are the Nazis. And then you have the head of everything, Ed Harris, who's basically acting as Hitler. That's how I heard it explained once. I don't know if that's a popular theory or if it's intentional. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't really think about that when I was watching it, but when I heard it, it kind of somewhat makes sense. But if you wanted to have another meaning besides the commentary on class or whatever. The director of Oldboy is a producer. The director of Oldboy and Stoker, he did the whole Vengeance trilogy. Which I think is one where the director probably had a lot of help as far as conducting the action scenes, because we know he can do action really well. The one problem I really have with this movie is we get a lot of exterior shots of like the train just on the tracks, and we see the surrounding Earth. I can understand if you wanted to show the Earth and how it looks in its frozen state, but number one, the CGI for this is really, really shoddy. It basically looks like video game graphics. And secondly, I think it was not in their favor to show the exterior shots because I think they would have had something going here with a claustrophobic feel if we just never saw outside the train. Like, it would have built like a building claustrophobia. But, nah, I don't know. I don't know why the exteriors needed to be in there, but, you know. Maybe they thought it would have been a wasted opportunity if they didn't show a frozen over Earth. I don't know. There's also a Soylent Green-esque subplot involving the protein blocks that they have to eat. That's all they have, it's just like this residuey, jello-y block. And that's all they eat all day, every day. And you're lucky to do that. And yeah, it's not exactly the Soylent Green thing, but it is a reveal when we find out what the protein blocks are made out of. And that's pretty much Snowpiercer. Yeah, it's extremely creative, and it's a little over 2 hours, but it flies. It's got an incredible pace, and it's got, great characters. That cast list is fantastic. Like I said, Tilda Swinton and Alison Pill really, really stand out here. They'll probably be some of the best performances you see this year. And yeah, the action scenes are great, and it has just enough to please, like, both kinds of audiences. Like, if you have the people looking for an action movie, I think they'll be pleased enough, and you have the people looking for some commentary or whatever, I think it's got enough of that for them as well, so. Yeah, I think a lot of people could like Snowpiercer. There was a controversy where Harvey Weinstein wanted to cut, like, 20 minutes out of it, because he didn't think American audiences would get it or something. I don't know what he would have cut, because everything, fits in there, but I guess that's just, I don't know. That's Weinstein, that's what he does. Our third movie is a now notorious, apparently, mind-bender of David Lynch proportions called Enemy, which is the direct follow-up to Prisoners. Not in story or anything, but it's the same director and Jake Gyllenhaal stars. Even they actually shot this before Prisoners, but they showed it TIFF together. And it came out in like April, and it's coming out on DVD. It just came out on DVD this past Tuesday, I think. And it's a really short, just little mind-bending thriller about Jake Gyllenhaal is a history teacher who basically leads a very repetitive life. He he goes and he talks the same lectures at school. He goes home and he has sex with his girlfriend. He grades papers, and it's just an ongoing thing over and over again. It mirrors the repetition he's talking about in his lecture itself. Even the score is a little... It's like the same few notes to go along with the repetition of it. But then one day that repetition just breaks because he's sitting in the teacher's lounge, and there's another guy in there that asks him if he likes movies. Ironically, I think... Whatever. I always try to think if I'm using ironically correctly. Jake Gyllenhaal has to say the line, no, I don't care for movies. And the guy says, well, I have a recommendation, because he wants something cheerful. If he's going to watch a movie, he wants it, to kind of cheer him up. So the guy offers a movie called Where There's a Will, There's a Way. Which is a horrible title for a movie, but that's probably the point. If it's a cheery movie, that makes sense. So he goes home, he watches the movie, and then he goes to bed. And he's clearly not impressed with it. But then he starts to kind of see the movie again in his dream. And that's when he comes to the conclusion that there was an actor in this movie that is his doppelganger. Completely. Only without the beard. So he looks up the actor and he finds out who it is. And he goes and he looks him up on Google. And sure enough, that is like I'm pretty sure that picture he finds of Daniel Sinclair is a picture that was once on Jake Gyllenhaal's IMDb page.
It looks like it would be.
And he manages to track the guy down. So not only does he look exactly like the guy, he sounds exactly like the guy. He basically is the guy. But he is married to... girl from Cosmopolis, what's her name? I lost it. But anyway, she is his pregnant wife. And he's seeing Melanie Laurent from Inglourious Basterds and Beginners and a bunch of other stuff. So, finally, Adam, who is the history teacher, becomes obsessed with meeting Daniel the actor, whose real name's actually Anthony.
Sarah Gadden.
So... he basically stalks him.
Yeah.
And even pretends to be him at the office. Until he finally scores a meeting with him. And then basically once they meet in a seamless effect where they're on screen at the same time. For a movie that looks like it was made so cheaply, I'm really surprised how amazing that effect looked. I mean, I know it's like, they've been doing that effect forever. But I'm still always kind of impressed when they do it so seamlessly like that. And of course you have the thing that I love to praise a lot of actors for that have to do this. Obviously Gyllenhaal has to subtly make two totally different performances because he's playing two totally different characters. I think there's a comment from a critic on the DVD cover that says the best performances of Jake Gyllenhaal's career. Nice. So, and basically, there's this funny little moment where Gyllenhaal calls him for the first time, and he realizes that the voice is the same. So he says, he's just kind of talking to him, and he realizes that it's the same. So he says, "Can you just say something again? Just say something." And his response is, "Who is this?" And his other response is, "Oh my god, that's amazing." And then they meet, and it turns into... actually, it doesn't turn into this. It was this from the get-go. But I'll get to the symbolism in a second. It basically turns into a David Lynch-esque movie. Whether that's a good or a bad thing depends on you. I'm loving it with Lynch, but... here's the thing. This movie turns into... it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Which is a start. The plot basically reverses itself, and Anthony starts to become obsessed with Adam. Particularly his girlfriend. And we don't know where this comes from. It's just, I guess Anthony's just a weird character. We don't really get too much in depth with them. But the table starts to turn, and it starts to be Anthony that stalks him and his girlfriend instead of the other way around. And it actually starts to get to a clever point to where there'll be scenes where we're not even sure which... There's one scene in particular that stands out where we're not even sure which one we're looking at. Because he's there by himself with a character that's only in one scene, and he's never addressed by name. But and I think it's also to show that the characters start to confuse themselves, because we see, like, obviously, we learn that Anthony loves blueberries, because he comes in from a run, and he's complaining that there's no blueberries for his shake. And he's gotta have blueberries. And of course he's the actor. So there's this scene, it's one scene with Isabella Rossellini, who it's probably a Lynch reference in herself. And he's talking to her, and we don't know which one he is, because she hasn't called him by name, we just know that this is his mom. And then she offers him blueberries, and he says, "I don't like blueberries." But then she says something about his fantasy of being a famous actor. So, it's kind of hard to... I mean, she could be referring to the fact that he's under the impression that his doppelganger is an actor, but that could have also been directly referring to the fact that because Daniel St. Clair is a very low-rent actor. He's like an extra, practically. So it would make sense if it was Daniel St. Clair that was being told your fantasy of being an actor. Because when he says he doesn't like blueberries, he looks baffled by what he just said. So it's really... yeah. Now, I'm going to stop here and say that everything from here on is probably spoiler territory.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, definitely spoiler territory. So, to basically go over, what could be happening here. Because this is one of those movies where you can only pretty much debate it. There's really no answer. The director refuses to give an answer.
They made the cast sign a confidentiality agreement.
I mean, there are interviews with the other actors that have their theories, but we're never going to get a real explanation. Apparently, it's one of those.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say anything.
Which may annoy you depending on who you are, and it annoys me sometimes. But I don't mind it here because I thought this movie was worth investing.
Oh yeah.
All these different theories in, because it's very interesting to watch play out. One of the most famous theories. We haven't even gone into the spiders yet, but I'll do that last. One of the things about it is, obviously the biggest theory is they're the same person. And he's having a double personality disorder thing going on. And there are some things that prove this. Apparently there are some things that also contradict it, but the things that really make it seem likely are... obviously, Adam has a girlfriend, and Anthony has the wife. And there is a scene where Anthony's wife is yelling at him about, "Are you seeing her again?" Which could be Adam's girlfriend. And then there's the scene where Adam's in school, and he gets called by Anthony. And Anthony says, Adam says, "Oh my god, that's so weird. I just had a feeling you were about to call me." Because it's the same mind. And then another one is, obviously there's the thing about when they first meet, they talk about their similarities, like their hands, and then Anthony says, "Do you have a scar on your chest?" Even though it's on his stomach, I don't know why he said chest. And Adam gets scared and runs away. Which means, yeah, he probably has the scar. One thing that really stands out is when he sees Anthony in the movie, he doesn't have the beard that Adam does. But then when we see Anthony in real life outside of the movies, he's got the same beard. So that could be a thing. There's the scene where the wife goes to visit Adam at the school just to see how closely resemblance this is. Because she's just talked to him over the phone and he's claiming this. She hasn't seen him before now. So she sits there and she talks to him, and it's freaking her out. And then he gets up and leaves. So the first thing she does is she gets on the phone to call Anthony. And it rings, and she's watching him go back into school. Now, it would be one thing if Anthony answered while she was watching Adam walk away, but Adam has already turned the corner and has disappeared when Anthony answers the phone.
Yep.
So...
Draw your own conclusion, really.
And, let's see. Should we go into the spider thing
Let's
now?
talk about the spiders.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Okay. The big symbolism in this movie is spiders. Obviously, the main thing is... The most obvious one everybody talks about is spiders basically represent his fear of women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the movie starts, we're at this weird club with these women. It looks like the auction in Taken. And there is a symbolism. There is a spider that gets stepped on, and then there's a spider that a tarantula really that's served like on a platter. And then we don't go back to that for a while. It comes back at the end. There is So there's okay. Well, for starters, there's the whole spider. He's trapped in a spider web thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like this repetition we were talking about has him trapped in this web, and that's what makes, I guess, the Anthony appear.
When you see the glass, when it shatters later on in the movie, it looks like a spider web.
Yeah. And of course, just his genuine fear of female intimacy. Like, well, for starters, and his mother too, because after we've had the one scene with his mom is when we get that shot of like the giant spider like over the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the moment where, obviously, when he has dreams about that weird club, it's a naked woman's body with a spider head on it, which was weird.
Yeah.
And then the ending where basically he's cleared this up. We're going with this theory. He's basically settled the thing with, he's gonna basically, there's this whole thing where Anthony does this thing where he wants to basically seduce Adam's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So he builds it up to make it seem like Adam slept with his wife. He basically practices the Raging Bull speech in the mirror so he can do it. And then once he's done that, they basically switch roles there, more or less.
Yeah.
And it's Anthony with the girlfriend in the car, and it's Adam with the wife. And of course, the wife says, "How was your day at school?" or something like that. When Adam's the teacher of them, so. And then when they get in the wreck, that's basically his way of shutting out Anthony to become Adam, or shutting out Adam to become Anthony.
Go either way.
And the girlfriend is obviously not a thing anymore because of the car. We assume they died. Well, he died in there and she died in there.
Yeah.
We're just totally in metaphors now. And
Yeah.
then finally, when it comes to the female intimacy of going into the bedroom with his wife, we get the last shot of the movie that everybody's talking about. When it comes to being intimate with his wife, he goes into the bedroom, and what's waiting for him is a gigantic spider, and that's the last shot of the movie. Some people find this shot hilarious, others find it horrifying. It depends on who you are, again.
I just kind of looked at it puzzled. I was like, John Peters would love this.
So, you can think whatever, it's just open. You can think whatever you want to think. That's basically where I take it.
Yeah.
The spiders thing loses me. But as far as, like, the relationship between them, that's the best thing I can come up with.
We will never find out the truth about the spiders. You guys remember that confidentiality agreement? That's about the cast saying anything about what spiders actually means. They're not allowed to say anything. So hopefully someday, somewhere down the line, someone says something. But honestly, it's really great for a movie like this to be up to your own personal interpretation.
Yeah. If you're up for it.
Oh, this is a trip.
It might,
to say the least.
It might piss a lot of people off too.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I can understand, even though I took to this movie and like it as much as I did, I would totally understand if somebody said, what is this arty bullshit? Get it away from me.
I was reading actually on the forums a few minutes ago about someone saying just that.
Because I've seen movies like this that are just bullshit for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That other people do see things in, so it's just a matter of where you're coming from.
Exactly.
Our next movie is a small movie that is also coming out on DVD this week, called Rob the Mob, which is a true story that happened in New York in 1991 about a couple named Bonnie and Clyde, played by Michael Pitt and Nina Arianda, I think is her name, who is a really accomplished stage actress. She won a Tony for Venus and Fur, and she did I think she did Billy Dawn for Born Yesterday. So basically, the movie starts and it's Valentine's Day, and Michael Pitt's plan is to rob a florist, because florists will probably have a lot of money on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, exactly.
But that goes awry and he gets arrested because he's totally inept as a criminal, and he ends up getting 18 months. And so she gets a job with Griffin Dunn as a telemarketer. And he gets released from prison. We just jump ahead 18 months. And he gets out and they're reunited and everything's great. They're going to start over. They're going to move in together. He's going to get a job with Griffin Dunn. That's basically Griffin Dunn's thing, is he just hires ex-cons. Like there's one guy working there that's got a tattoo entirely covering his face. And he just tells them, yeah, he was a convicted sex offender, but don't worry, he's a pretty nice guy. But then, this is also going parallel with the Gotti trial, because they really loosely talk about it, but Michael Pitt's character basically has a score to settle, because these mobsters were responsible for his father's death in one way or another. So his plan is to basically rob all the mobsters in town and basically use their money to move away to Florida with his girlfriend and get married. Get married on Christmas. But things obviously don't go that well, because he is an inept criminal, literally robbing from the mob. He goes in to their hangouts, pulls a gun on them, and takes their money, literally. It's the scenes are a lot like the robbery and Killing Them Softly. That's what it is. That opening scene where Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn rob Ray Liotta's poker game, that's basically what the robbery scenes are like.
This will not end well for this man.
So, just Wikipedia their names and you get it's just there, the whole movie's there in one paragraph.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. The main mobster, the head mobster, is Andy Garcia. And he's basically the high figure who doesn't, everybody does the stuff for him, but he's got his own. He's obviously threatening, but he also is more focused on the family thing and doing he was so fresh-faced in movies like Godfather 3 and Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, but now he's like the world-weary one with like the beard, and he does the family thing while everybody else does the dirty work. But he will step in if he has to. And they also take up refuge with but they find somebody they can trust in a reporter that's Ray Romano, who's basically going to tell their story for them and make them famous. Now, obviously Bonnie and Clyde are not their real names. It's what the publicity calls them. There's no coincidence like that. Now, the interesting thing this movie does is half of it is the robberies and the mob and stuff like that, and it's actually got a surprisingly comic edge to it, despite some of the dark material. The other half of the movie is their love story. And oddly enough, for me anyway, because normally this just doesn't work for me, one of the strongest aspects of the movie is their relationship. Because it's actually, amidst everything they're doing, you actually want to see them run away together because they're so happy together. And it's just a really sweet story between them. but obviously amidst all that, we have the romance and we have the comedic moments, but it never strays away from what it is. There's always that impending feel that tragedy could strike at any moment, given, the high risk of what they're doing. There is a lot of recognizable faces in this. We have Kathy Moriarty, speaking of Raging Bull from the last review, who is Michael Pitt's mom, who's basically when he went to jail and after his dad died, they were basically left to run the florist that he ran. And he's basically the black sheep to them now, he's trying to make it up to them. We have Frank Whaley as an FBI agent that's basically tracking them down and staking them out. It's always fun to see Frank Whaley in things because he's great. We have Bruce Altman as a lawyer. He's one of the lawyers at the Gotti trial. I talked about Griffin Dunn a little bit ago. He's really great. I've always loved Griffin Dunn. He always just pops up in movies and does just the right kind of comedy relief and then just does his thing. He's also really obsessed with the Gotti trial, so they actually leave work one day just to go, because he had no idea you could just walk into the Gotti trial and just sit down and watch it. And he's sitting there like a giddy child. There is a crucial but really brief character that's Burt Young from Rocky and many B gangster movies. He plays a character who basically, obviously he's much older and Michael Pitt's trying to rob him, but he's basically trying to say, I'm old, leave me alone. He's the best put up a fight that he can get. And this is where a major plot point comes in, where one of the things he robs from Burt Young's character is basically a family tree written on a piece of paper that has every name in the crime family on it. And basically everything they are responsible for. So basically the whole thing is they're going to work with Ray Romano, because Ray Romano and Frank Whaley's characters are like working together to kind of sort this out. Frank Whaley offers him information so they can get it on the front page of the papers and stuff like that. Basically their plan is to make a deal to turn over the list to the cops to get protection, basically. But that may or may not go horribly awry in one way or another. Now it's from the same director as City Island, who is also a really great Andy Garcia movie that came out in 2010. It's not quite Coen Brothers-esque, but it's got just enough of that tragedy and comedy mix to where nothing really feels out of place. The movie is very, consistent in its tone, and it's got a really good thing going here. With it being just this movie I didn't really know about until I was surprised by the casting, because I was like, why have I not seen this yet? And I learned it was coming out on DVD, and that kind of worried me that I hadn't heard about it until then, but I was really relieved because it's actually pretty good. It's got, it does have those things like, he has the gigantic machine gun that he doesn't know how to use, that he keeps in the refrigerator. It's almost in that Coen vein, but it's obviously not the same quality because that's like a whole new level. But yeah, it's just enough to be. It's not a waste of time at all. I would check it out if you could. It's perfectly fine. Our next movie isn't so much though. Our next movie is a movie that came out 1 or 2 weeks ago. I'm a little late on it. It's called Lullaby. Another movie I was really surprised I wasn't hearing about till now because it also has a really steep cast list. Which I'll go through in a second. But the main character is Garrett Edlund, who is flying into town. And the first time we see him, he's smoking in an airplane bathroom. And so, as soon as he comes out of the bathroom, there's 2 flight attendants standing there, and one of them says, "Well, sir, you're under arrest." But we learn the way his character is because he's one of those guys that manages to charm the flight attendant into letting it go. the reason he's on the plane is because his dad, who's played by Richard Jenkins, is dying of cancer. He was one of those guys that, when he was told he had cancer, he only had 6 months. But this is 12 years later. And he's on life support, and he's making the decision himself. Within the next 24 hours, he's going to pull his own plug. So he wants the whole family here.
Mm.
And it basically is a movie that's basically exploring that controversy of assisted suicide and whether it's good or not. But it doesn't explore that too much because it's one of those wacky family bickery movies. And it's 2 hours long too.
Oh wow!
So, yay!
It's a bit redundant.
Well, we got a lot of characters that go through here. Well, also the bickering starts when his sister comes into it. His sister is that woman from Downton Abbey and Winter's Tale. Her name's escaping me. A lot of names have escaped me in this video. That doesn't normally happen. Jessica Brown, something else. It's always the third name I forget.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, anyway, he is her sister. She is his sister. And, the fighting starts immediately, because one of the first things they learn is, basically, they had an inheritance they were going to get. And basically everybody is accusing Garrett Hedlund of that's the only reason he's here. Because he didn't want to come here in the first place, to just watch his dad die.
Finley.
Yes. So, we learned that he thought they were spoiled, so he intentionally blew the inheritance. It's gone. So the only reason they have to be here now is to be a family. Now, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, and another plot point here that pretty much goes nowhere. No, it really does go nowhere. The fight is, Garrett Hedlund's basically letting this happen. Just like, okay, whatever. But the sister is putting up a fight and basically, wants him to stay on the life support. And basically her job in this 24 hours is to come up with an argument good enough to make him not do it. And that's basically her whole storyline. And they make it like it's going to be the whole plot of the movie, and she's only in like 2 scenes. And we get constant flashbacks of how much, he wasn't the greatest father, and he was disapproving of everything, and didn't let them do what they wanted to do. They have a fight over religion, and because there's a flashback where they're at a cemetery, and he's basically saying, this is where our family plot is, and Garrett Hedlund's saying, screw that, I'm getting cremated, and they basically have a whole religious debate. There's a scene where the flashback where they're at one of his concerts, and Richard Jenkins plays the guy who was the kind of dad that said that was great, but you could have done better. Stuff like that. Okay. Let's go through this cast list. Starting with Richard Jenkins. Richard Jenkins obviously is the best of the cast here, which probably would not surprise you at all.
No.
Because and the weird thing is, all of the other characters are running around frantically in this 24 hours doing God knows what, having these big, great emotional scenes. Richard Jenkins is the best of the cast, and he's entirely confined to a bed. And he doesn't really have any that gigantic, big emotional scenes. He's just there to basically, witness his family, make up or fight or whatever. And he just kind of lays there and has to take it. But he's still there and has, the sensitive scenes. And he's basically the only character in this movie with a sense of humor, ironically. That's definitely ironically. Now, and there's, a really nice scene where, they bring in, a guy, an estranged family member and his fiancée. And she's meeting him for the first time. And he does, the you make sure you take care of him scene and stuff like that. And it's actually surprisingly a really, really nice, tender scene. And then, just as the way the scene is shot, the guy bends down to hug Richard Jenkins. And as he bends down, we reveal Garrett Hedlund standing behind him, just eating chips with a disgusted look on his face while this is happening. So, our next cast member is... it's also worth noting, I hate to make this comparison, but to be totally honest, Richard Jenkins is basically playing his character from Dear John with more personality. That's basically what this character is. We have Ann Archer here, Oscar nominee, who's basically here just to be the sad wife and cry. That's all she does. It's a completely thankless part, sadly. Speaking of really thankless parts, we have Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard plays Richard Jenkins' doctor. That's all he does. He just comes in, does little checkups, and leaves. He has one scene at the end that's kind of good, but it's really, really brief. I'm not sure what made Terrence Howard take this role, because he's in it for like a minute and a half. Out of 2 hours, that's not very long. In my least favorite character of the movie, who you all know that I love so much, Jennifer Hudson.
Yeah.
Jennifer Hudson is an unbearable character who basically spends every waking moment at this hospital. It takes place within a 24-hour period, and she never leaves. She's the sassy nurse that doesn't take shit from anybody, and basically is demeaning to everybody she comes across. I have no idea how she has a job. And she basically, does the high and mighty thing to everybody. So that character got really, really annoying really, really fast. But I think she's supposed to be comedy. I guess.
Or supposed comedy.
And then we have... I don't know how they got the actors they did for this movie. Especially the parts they were given. Amy Adams is in this movie. As Garrett Hedlund's girlfriend. Kind of girlfriend, kind of ex-girlfriend. I have no idea. But she basically magically appears just from out of nowhere to basically comfort him and run into him and to let him dialogue about his troubles. There's one scene where I actually laughed out loud because when I saw the first scene she was in, I was like, well, that's convenient. She just happened to be where he was walking by. She was like coming out of a building. Well, there's actually a scene where he's on the sidewalk in the middle of the night, and she just comes strolling around the corner, just walking by herself in her pajamas, just in time for him to need to talk about more things. Now, and that's the thing, is her character is so underdeveloped that that first scene she was introduced, they had like a whole dialogue together, and I still had trouble figuring out who she was in relation to him. I don't know. But then, okay, now, obviously things are going to happen because he's grieving right now because his dad's about to cut off his life support. And he's going around town just trying to figure out what to do with his emotions. And she's basically his only source of, getting this emotion out there. Well, he gets into a fight with somebody. I think it's over a cab. He gets into a fight with a guy. And her response is to say, well, okay then, and walk away pissed off. So he has to chase after her screaming, I'm sorry. The guy who got into a fight because his emotions are out of whack because his dad's about to die has to chase the girl down the street screaming, I'm sorry, I got into a fight. I don't know what she's so concerned about. But, whatever. Now, our last character to talk about is this cancer patient that's in the same building. It's I think she's 17 or something. She's in that 15 to 17 area. And she's doing the chemo, she's got the bald head, she's doing the, dying kid thing. And they completely lift the scene with James Badge Dale from Flight, and he and the cancer patient have a cigarette in the stairs. And, because she does the thing where he's like, you're too young to be smoking. She's like, well, I'm too young to die, too. It's like, what am I going to do? Get more cancer? So she basically becomes his best friend over the span of 12 hours. They do a thing where they give her a makeshift prom because she's not going to, live to see her own prom. The kids just randomly set this up in the hospital, and her date to the prom is Garrett Hedlund. And it's a lot like, if you ever saw that episode of House, where, Chase got in trouble for kissing the little girl who had cancer because she was afraid she wasn't going to get a first kiss. It's basically that plot a little bit. Except he doesn't get in trouble and it's a little more innocent than that. And she's basically just there to make the movie more sad. That's it. Luckily we don't have to go through her whole thing, but, we do, it's really weird because he goes and he sings a song to these kids to cheer them up. Because he's a musician and he just happens to have a guitar with him. And they give him this weird, they batter him with questions about, we're gonna die before we've had sex. And then one of them says, what's it like? And they actually ask him. These kids look like they're 10. I don't think that's quite, I think that's just a little before they have those questions.
Just a tad.
But it's for weird comedy. But yes, the movie feels really, really long. It's like 1:56. And like I said, it's the longest 24 hours in, history. So much so that I kept forgetting it was the same day. Like, we'd cut to a scene and I'd keep thinking it was like days later. But no, it's all in a 24-hour span. And there's a lot of scenes with, the family drama with, I'm sorry, no, it's my fault. That's said a lot. And it's lazy and cliche, and it basically, when the dialogue that's actually in the scenes, they seem to not even care about. It's basically they wanted to get the story points in there, and whatever the characters say, it doesn't really matter. We can just throw in all the cliches to, get past that scene and on to the next one. I will say, this isn't really a spoiler, because this is where the movie was always coming to. There is one really, really powerful scene in this movie, and that is, of course, the scene we've been leading to. Because, the thing I was really impressed about how ballsy it was to do this, is because I think normally, the normal thing you would do in a movie like this, is say, okay, this is the moment, this is when we're gonna do it. And then it would just, fade, dissolve into an empty bed, or dissolve into a cemetery, or whatever. They pull the plug and we see everything that follows. And it's really tough to watch.
I could see that.
That scene was way too good for this movie. That was some powerful stuff. But sadly, like I said, the movie can't live up to the power that scene brings. It's all cliche, it's all characters we just don't care about at all. And in a movie like this, that's all you have to care about. So if you can't make your characters work in a movie like this, you should have stopped at the beginning. So that's a bummer. Especially with that how could you waste such a cast like that?
Yeah, no lie.
Hedlund is okay. I do really like him in general, but here his character is just so self-centered and, just, you want to bash his head in a couple of times. Richard Jenkins' performance, though, is really great.
It always is.
Obviously.
That man's going to be an Oscar winner someday. I guarantee it.
Took him as far as 2008 to get the nomination.
Yeah.
Okay, our last movie is another little scene movie that came out in January. It was probably one of those movies that was out for 1 weekend. And it got, its DVD also came out this week. We had
Playing catch up this week.
3 DVD releases this week.
Yeah.
This movie is called Repentance, and it stars Forrest Whitaker and Anthony Mackie. So we're off to a good start.
Yeah.
It's basically selling itself as one of those southern gothic horror movies, kind of like The Skeleton Key.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But it's not quite that. The movie starts, and Anthony Mackie and his brother's played by Mike Epps, and they're drunk and they're reckless and they're driving around, speeding through the night. And they run over something in the road, and then they crash their car. And then we fast forward to like maybe a year, however long later. And Anthony Mackie has basically used this experience to become a spiritual advisor, who's just getting a book deal and everything. And he's approached at a signing by Forrest Whitaker, who's basically he basically seems like a really uneasy, disturbed guy. And he's basically getting the book signed, and he says, I'm a big fan. He's like, do you by any chance do, like, private sessions or anything like that? And Mackie says, well, I'm not really doing that right now, but... eventually, he gets offered, I think it's like $300 a session. Because, well, the thing here is, Mike Epps has now just gotten out of prison, and is basically forcing himself into Mackie's house with his wife. So, Mackie and his wife are here, and Mike Epps is basically forcing himself on them and saying, I need to stay here because I just got out of prison, I've got nowhere else to go. And he's basically, he's that brother that's in trouble with some guys. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Mackie decides he's going to help him out, and to get the money, he's going to do the private sessions with Forrest Whitaker. And it turns out that the thing here is Whitaker is really upset because his mom has died and he can't get over it. He's seeing her everywhere, and it's just not something he can come to terms with. And it's really affecting his... Like, he has his ex-wife and he has his daughter, and his daughter stays with him most of the time. So he's basically trying to get over this. So, what he does is, they basically do the sessions, and then the sessions eventually turn into these weird, supernatural rituals. Obviously, Mackie doesn't actually believe in that stuff, but it's like a therapeutic thing. Long story short, here's this, okay. We start off with Anthony Mackie running over something in the road that we don't see. And then we have Forrest Whitaker, whose mother has died recently, and who wants Mackie specifically to help him through this. You'd have to be pretty blind and oblivious to not see what's going on here. So, the movie takes a horror turn. For starters, it's already ominous immediately, because when Mackie finally gives in and goes to Forrest Whitaker's house, the first thing he sees is a hole in the ground where they cover it up by saying it's where a pipe burst, but it looks like it appears to be a hole dug in the ground in his front yard with a white body bag in it. But then this goes untalked about for the rest of the movie.
Of course it does.
Now, the thing is eventually Mackie gets the idea to leave town because he's done with all this. He wants to start over, he wants to leave his past behind and forget everything. So he goes to Whitaker's house, he gives him the money back and says, we can't do these sessions anymore because I'm leaving town for good, and I won't be back. Well, this was the wrong thing to say because we now learn that Forrest Whitaker is extremely, completely unhinged. So he knocks Mackie out and ties him up in the basement and basically tortures him. And basically says that he's going to torture him until he confesses all of his secrets. Once again, as it progresses forward, if you don't see where this is headed and how this connects...
Yeah.
And the movie gets pretty sadistic from here. It's really slow burn as it goes, and because you're not quite sure where it's going to go, but this is what it's been leading to. And eventually it turns into misery, especially with the scenes where Mackie, makes these half-hearted escape attempts that eventually get foiled. Make sure the penguin's facing the right way. And of course, the crazy thing about this also is all of this is happening while his little daughter is upstairs asleep. And he basically has to keep it from her. Like, he's basically torturing Mackie down here. And then the daughter peeks in and says, Dad, will you read me a story? I can't sleep. And he's like, yeah, I'll be right there. Goes back to torturing Mackie, goes upstairs and reads his daughter a bedtime story.
Nice.
Now, it's my understanding this movie didn't do very well reviews-wise, but I was able to get into it. Like, even if it's really obvious from the get-go, and it's really poorly directed. Like, there's a lot of zoom-ins and, you know, these weird flashbacks that just make the obvious even more obvious. And it's not as suspenseful as it could have been. Also, the score is really wrong, too. The score is really loud and doesn't seem to be in tune with anything it's on screen with. But the movie itself, here's the main thing. Anthony Mackie is great. You know, always. But Forrest Whitaker is the reason to see this movie. He hasn't had a performance this good since I'm not sure when. And he's a really good actor, too. Unlike most people, I really liked him in The Butler. But his performance in this is so impressive, to put it mildly, because here's the kind of character that he plays. He basically, obviously the first time we meet him, he's got that sympathetic thing about him, and we know he's just a pitiful guy that misses his mom and can't get over her death. Mm. But then when he turns into this character that's torturing Anthony Mackie in the basement, there are two scenes, one right after the other. I'll actually go in reverse here to tell you. There's one scene where his ex-wife comes to the door, and he answers it, and she's there to pick up his daughter and take her with him. Well, basically there's this really nice moment between them where he says, you know, I'm getting the right help, and I think I'm really having a breakthrough, and I think if you just let me, you know, see her more, maybe we can all sort this out, and we can all, you know, start a family again, and everything can be okay. Mm. And it's a really nice moment where you really, really believe him, where he feels like he's reaching a breakthrough. Here's what I haven't told you yet. The scene right before this one, literally right before this, he has to stop what he's doing in the previous scene to go answer the door so this scene can happen. Right before that nice scene happened, it was a scene of him beating Anthony Mackie with a bag of glass.
Well then.
And he's so good that scene right after it, you actually believed him when he was talking to his wife about, you know, starting a family and making everything okay.
Psychos can be people too.
And he does that back and forth through the whole movie. Like I said, he'll be beating Anthony Mackie with a pipe in one scene. There's one scene where he takes like a power sander and puts it up to his foot and threatens him with it. And then goes upstairs and has a tender scene with his daughter. And this is the whole movie. He just goes back and forth like that. And it's seamless. And it's insane.
Sounds fun.
It's a great performance. So, and then of course, you know, eventually we have the scene. It does start to fall apart at the end when we have to have the inevitable scene where it gets a little more conventional, and he starts texting the wife and brother pretending to be him so he can get all of them at the house at the same time so we can have a big climax.
Yeah.
And the ending is... The whole conclusion is really abrupt, but the ending's pretty ballsy, to give it credit. I don't know that I'm a fan of the ending, but that's not the direction you see it going. So that's... I'll take it.
Right on.
So yeah, I don't know if this movie will be for everybody, but, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it for a while, but it's really not a bad movie, and like I said, just seeing that incredible performance from Forrest Whitaker is enough. So if you want to find that, I'm sure no harm will come to you. So that's the last of this.
Alright, as always, we're going to run through all the movies and give your yay or nay. Transformers 4?
It wasn't for me, personally.
Same here. Snowpiercer?
Yes, definitely.
Enemy?
If you want to give it a go and see what you think, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, it's an incredible film. Rob the Mob?
Yeah, it's worth checking out.
Lullaby?
No, you can move on from that.
Repentance?
Yeah, just like I said, so...
Alright, so that ends another week of AJ's movie reviews here on Pop. So, next week, Next week's going to be a very interesting week because we have stuff in the middle of the week and we don't have anything on Friday, so that's a good thing. We've got Deliver Us from Evil, we have Earth Echo, we have Tammy, and we have a bunch of limited releases as
Grace
well.
of Monaco.
Grace of Monaco, finally.
I keep mentioning IMI, it'll probably be. And potentially the Lunchbox.
Yeah, we have some other stuff still to come soon. Stay tuned later this week. We have Best, Worst, and Most Anticipated for this weekend for the half year and the most anticipated for the rest of the year. Ashley joins us tomorrow with a video game segment, as always, and NXT and SmackDown coming up probably Saturday as well. Sunday, brand new Versus, and actually it was given to us, well, we had the idea to do it, but we had the idea to do it again by a fan who actually messaged me one time and said we should do this, so we're going to do it, and it's coming this Sunday. So, AJ, any parting words?
That's it.